3 weeks before the wedding, my son's future daughter-in-law, Ava, called me. "Your presence creates a certain tension," she stated, her voice devoid of warmth. "We want a peaceful atmosphere on our wedding day. It would be best for everyone if you weren't there." A moment of stunned silence passed as I sat at my kitchen table, my hands still damp from folding a load of Ethan's clothes. Then, I managed a single, quiet response. "All right." Ava clearly thought she had won, but what she failed to comprehend was that she had just ignited a fire she couldn't possibly extinguish. Guys, if you're enjoying this, please hit like and subscribe, and let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from. Thank you. I didn't confide in Ethan. I told no one. I simply sat with the jarring news, trying to process how I had gone from finalizing floral arrangements to being completely excised like a stray mark. I had been accommodating from the very beginning, absorbing 1,000 tiny cuts to maintain harmony. When Ava overlooked my birthday, I let it pass without a word. When she critiqued my lasagna as being a little dense and volunteered to supply a gluten-free alternative for Thanksgiving, I smiled and agreed it sounded wonderful. I even remained silent when she informed the wedding coordinator that ivory was an unflattering color for my complexion and suggested I consider a darker hue. I was the one who paid for the venue, the string quartet, and the imported orchids she insisted reminded her of a childhood in Bali, though she could never pinpoint the specific island. I held down 2 jobs to finance her fantasy wedding, all while she dismissed me with the casual disregard one might show a talkative cab driver. And then, she disinvited me. It was Ava's decision, not Ethan's. She didn't even bother to consult him. Or if she had, I chose not to entertain the thought. The notion that my son would permit such a thing without a fight was a more painful reality than him being kept in the dark. In the days that followed, I went through the motions. I cleared out the guest room I'd prepared, canceled my dress fitting, and ignored the growing pile of invoices that still needed to be settled. I told myself that this was a part of motherhood, staying quiet so your child can find happiness, even if it tears you apart inside. But this particular silence felt wrong. It wasn't just the sting of exclusion, it was the way she delivered the news, cold, absolute, as if she had no fear of me causing a disturbance. She was afraid I might discover something. That evening, after the house settled into a deep quiet and the dishwasher's hum was the only sign of life, I opened my laptop. It wasn't to pry, I reasoned, but to feel a bit less like I'd been rendered invisible. I began searching for pictures from the engagement party, the one I had hosted. Ava had posted sparingly about it, a single photograph, with me conspicuously absent. I continued to scroll through her profile, a curated collection of smoothie bowls, beach vistas, and ambiguous captions about manifesting one's destiny. Then I reached her older content, from a time before Ethan, before the designer clothes and the air of manufactured confidence. Her face was the same, yet softer. Her smile seemed genuine. It was then that I found something that made me freeze. I leaned closer, squinting, and clicked to see the full-sized image. The caption was cryptic, and the man standing beside her was certainly not my son. I stared at the photograph until my vision blurred. Ava was in a white dress, short and simple, not quite bridal, but close. She was next to a man I didn't recognize, in front of a building that looked remarkably like a courthouse. The caption read, "Forever starts today." It was dated 3 years prior. I clicked on his tagged username. The account was gone, either deleted or set to private, but the tag remained, at David_Santiago. A knot formed in my stomach. I scrolled back to the photo, studying Ava's face. It was undeniably her, younger, but the same eyes, the same mouth, the same meticulously practiced tilt of her head. Yet the smile in that picture was different, authentic and unguarded, not the rehearsed grin she now wore like a shield. This man, David, had his arm wrapped around her waist. Their bodies seemed to fit together as if they were meant to. I clicked through more of her old posts, hoping to find another picture of him. There were only a few, all from that same period. After that, there was nothing. No public breakup, no mournful quotes, just an abrupt silence. I didn't want to make assumptions, but I couldn't ignore how strange it all felt. Ethan had never once brought up a man named David, and Ava had certainly never mentioned him. I told myself I was overthinking it. Perhaps he was a serious ex-boyfriend, and they had simply gone their separate ways. But the timing felt off. So did the fact that Ava had never, not once, spoken of her past in any detail. Every time I inquired about something personal, where she attended school, her parents' occupations, how long she'd lived in the city, she would deflect. "Oh, I've moved around so much," or "It's a complicated family dynamic." There was always an excuse for her vagueness. At the time, I assumed she was just private. Now it felt like she was actively concealing something. I stared at that photo for a long while, unable to look away. Something about it wouldn't release its grip on me. I opened a new browser tab and typed her full name, Ava Bennett, then Ava Bennett Santiago. Nothing of note appeared. Then just Ava Santiago, and finally Ava Santiago marriage. I wasn't truly expecting a result, but something appeared, a listing on an obscure website. It was a wedding registry entry, sparse on details and with no photos, just two names, Ava Marie Santiago and David Elias Santiago. The date was June 2020. My chest tightened. It could be a coincidence, a relative with the same name, a cousin perhaps, but my intuition told me otherwise. I recognized that look on her face in the photograph, and I knew her pattern of evading questions. This wasn't just a closed chapter of her life, it was a fortified chamber, and now she was about to marry my son without ever disclosing it. I leaned back in my chair, my gaze sweeping across the quiet room. Ethan's old backpack, the one he'd used all through high school, was still hanging on a hook by the door. I had patched its ripped pocket 3 times before he finally let me buy him a new one. That same boy, my boy, was on the verge of marrying someone who might be a complete stranger. I shut the laptop. I didn't have concrete proof yet, only a powerful gut feeling and a trail of clues that was growing warmer. But I knew myself. Once something feels fundamentally wrong, I can't ignore it, especially when it involves Ethan. I didn't sleep that night. I lay awake, replaying every conversation with Ava, every deflection, every hollow smile, every instance she had made me feel like an interloper in my own family. And now, this discovery. She hadn't just excluded me from the wedding. She had done it because she suspected I might see through her facade. That wasn't paranoia, it was instinct, and my instinct had never led me astray. The next morning, I returned to my laptop and began to search with more focus. I wasn't digging for gossip or trying to sabotage her. I simply needed the truth. I owed that to Ethan. I saved a screenshot of the photo and went back to my research. If Ava had been married previously, a record would exist, and if that marriage was still legally active, I didn't let myself complete the thought. I just started digging, methodically and carefully. I wasn't ready to articulate my fears, but something told me this path led somewhere much darker than I wanted to imagine. I was determined to find out what Ava was hiding, and the lengths she would go to keep me silent. I didn't let Ethan know I was investigating her. He called that night, his tone casual, asking if I had seen the updated seating arrangement Ava had distributed. I told him I had. He didn't ask for my opinion on it, nor did he seem to have registered that I was no longer on the guest list. I could hear her laughing in the background, a sound that made my skin crawl. It was too polished, too perfectly placed, just like everything else about her. I kept my voice light, inquiring about the catering and if he needed any help. He said they had everything under control. Then he ended the call. I stared at my phone for a long time afterward. I wanted to believe he was unaware, that she had made this decision unilaterally. But Ethan wasn't naive. He had simply stopped asking the important questions. I wasn't sure if that was a product of love, denial, or a combination of both. The next morning, I took the day off from work and began to organize my findings. I created a folder on my computer desktop titled AVA Personal and placed the Instagram screenshots inside, followed by the registry record. Then, I delved into searching for official court records. I wasn't certain what I would uncover. Perhaps nothing, perhaps everything. Public records can be a convoluted and inconsistent maze, but they sometimes tell the stories that people believe they have successfully buried. I searched county by county, cross-referencing names. Each dead end only strengthened my conviction that I was on the correct path. Ava had meticulously erased something from her history. I was certain of it now. People only go to such lengths to scrub their past when they are hiding something significant. It took hours, but then I found it. A marriage license for Ava Marie Santiago and David Elias Santiago, issued in Camden County on June 12, 2020. There was no corresponding divorce record. None. I sat back, my heart pounding in my chest. This was no longer speculation. She wasn't just secretive. She was still legally married to another man, while actively planning a wedding to my son. I printed the record, highlighted the date, and circled the names. Then, I opened a new tab and searched for David Santiago. It proved more difficult than I anticipated. There was no social media presence, no current employment listings, no residential address. It was as if he had vanished, but the Instagram photo was undeniable. He existed. He had a face, a name, a legal connection to her. I had a growing suspicion that she had orchestrated his disappearance, paying him to stay hidden. It wasn't just a hunch. It aligned with her method of operation. She didn't confront problems. She erased them, just as she was trying to erase me. I stood up, retrieved the wedding binder I had painstakingly compiled for months, and flipped to the payment section. My handwriting filled the pages. Notes on deposits, balance due dates, and items Ava had deemed urgent. It looked like a planner's workbook, but in reality, it was a ledger of my own complicit silence. I had paid for the privilege of being excluded, and now, it seemed, I was about to pay for the truth. I sat down again and performed one last search. Warehouse jobs in Camden. I wasn't sure why, just a faint memory of one of Ava's vague responses when I had asked where she used to live. I went through a rough patch in Camden for a while, she had said. It's where I learned to be a hustler. The comment had meant nothing at the time. Now it was a critical clue. I found a job posting from a logistics company from 6 months ago. It was for a temporary position. The supervisor's name was listed. I called and asked if a David Santiago had worked there in the past year. I expected them to say no, but the man on the phone replied, "Yeah, we had a guy by that name. Don't think he works here anymore, though." That was all I needed. I asked for the company's address, claiming to be an old friend trying to reconnect. He gave it to me without a second thought. I wrote it down. I didn't know what I would say if I found him. I didn't even know what I wanted from him. All I knew was that if he was still legally married to Ava, Ethan had a right to know. I would not stand by and watch him marry a complete stranger with a mountain of secrets. I folded the court record, slid it into a manila folder, and grabbed my car keys. If David Santiago was real and willing to speak, I was driving to Camden in the morning. And if he wasn't, if Ava had buried him so deep that he was untraceable, then I would know exactly what kind of person my son was about to bind his life to. Either way, the silence was over. The 4-hour drive to Camden was mostly flat highway, offering far too much time for contemplation. I didn't listen to music or make any calls. I just kept one hand on the steering wheel and the other resting on the manila folder on the passenger seat. Inside were the marriage license, the Instagram photo, a printout of the warehouse job information, and a sticky note with David Santiago written in block letters. I wasn't sure what I was expecting to find. Perhaps a man in a decent apartment, remarried and moving on, bewildered by the appearance of a woman from Chicago at his door. Or maybe someone who would lie to protect Ava. Or perhaps no one at all. I had encountered enough dead ends in my life to know how to navigate them. But I also knew the feeling when something was undeniably real. This wasn't a dead end. It was a fissure in the facade. The address I had led to a duplex. One half was freshly painted, while the other had windows clouded with grime and a "For Rent" sign peeling at the edges. I parked across the street, double-checked the address, and then walked over, clutching the folder. I knocked once, then again. I heard movement inside, a pause, and then the door creaked open just enough to reveal him. He was wearing sweatpants and a hoodie, and was unshaven. He looked as if he hadn't been outside in weeks, but it was him, David Santiago. I recognized the face from the picture. I could have picked him out of a lineup. "David," I said. He didn't respond or even nod, just stared at me, waiting for me to state my business so he could shut the door. "My name is Sarah," I continued. "I believe we need to talk." Still, there was no reaction. I held up the folder slightly. "It's about Ava." That got his attention. His eyes darted to the folder and then back to my face. I watched the sequence of emotions flash across his features, recognition, then panic, then resignation. He opened the door wider. "What do you want?" he asked, his voice rough. "To talk," I replied. "Just for 5 minutes." He let me in. The apartment smelled of instant ramen and stale air. A mattress lay on the floor, accompanied by a single chair. There were no decorations, no television, just silence and a clock on the wall with hands that had long since stopped moving. He sat on the edge of the mattress. I remained standing. "She's marrying my son," I said, "next weekend." That seemed to land. He blinked. "Your son, Ethan. She's been with him for about 2 years. She told us he was a client she was consulting for. She told him she's never been married." David let out a short, sharp, weary laugh. "Of course she did." I opened the folder, removed the marriage license, and handed it to him. He didn't flinch, just glanced at it and said, "Yeah, that's us." "You're not divorced?" I asked. "No, she paid me to disappear." That stopped me. "She what?" $10,000, he said. "She told me she'd ruin my life if I ever contacted her again." I had just lost my job, got evicted. She found me living in a motel, said I was holding her back, that she had big plans. She gave me the cash and told me to vanish. "And you did?" "What do you think?" he asked, gesturing at the bare room. "I needed the money." I took a moment before speaking, then sat down, the folder still in my lap. "She cut me out of the wedding," I said. "Told me I make her uncomfortable, that she wants peace." David shook his head. "She's terrified someone will expose her. That's her move. She constructs these perfect new versions of her life, then bolts when the truth starts to catch up. So this wasn't just some youthful mistake. This was a calculated pattern." "She's always calculating," he confirmed. "She's brilliant at it. Too brilliant." I looked at him, really studied him. He wasn't just tired. He was hollowed out. Whatever Ava had done to him hadn't just derailed his life. It had stolen something essential from him. And now she was setting up the same game with my son. "I need you to come with me," I said, "to the wedding." "Tell the truth." His head snapped up. "No, no way. She said a lot of things, but this isn't about her anymore. This is about Ethan. He doesn't know. He has no clue who he's about to marry. And if you don't tell him, she will continue to do this to people." "You think he'll believe me? Not if it's just my word against hers." "But I have everything," I countered. "The documents, the photos, your testimony. It will be enough." "Why should I?" he asked. "Why should I risk getting involved again just to get burned?" I opened my handbag, took out my checkbook, wrote out a number, and handed it to him. $20,000 for 1 day. One truth. He stared at the check as if it were radioactive. "You're serious," he breathed. "Deadly serious." He didn't speak, just held the check, his hands trembling slightly. I didn't pressure him. I let the silence do its work. Finally, he looked up. "If I do this," he said slowly, "we do it my way. Deal." He gave a single, firm nod, the kind a person gives when they know they've crossed a point of no return. I stood, closed the folder, and walked to the door. "I'll pick you up at 9 a.m., I said. "Don't be late." On the morning of the wedding, I was awake long before my alarm. I didn't eat or drink coffee. I just sat on the edge of my bed, looking at the dress I had intended to wear before I was uninvited. It was a simple navy blue dress with tailored sleeves, just long enough to feel elegant. I hadn't purchased anything new. I couldn't bear the thought of spending another cent on this sham. I smoothed the hem, zipped it up, and examined my reflection. I didn't look angry. I looked resolved, like a woman who knew precisely what she was about to do and why it was necessary. At 8:57 a.m., I parked in front of David's apartment. He was already waiting outside, wearing a wrinkled dress shirt and the same worn-out shoes he'd had on 2 days prior. When he got into the car, I handed him a tie. "I borrowed it from my neighbor's son," I explained. He nodded, not speaking. The drive was quiet, not with tension, but with focus, as if we were heading to a job that required clean, precise execution. The wedding was at a country club about 30 minutes from the city, Ava's dream venue, with its grand chandeliers, imported marble floors, and a string quartet playing music designed to make the guests feel more affluent just by being present. As I pulled into the parking lot, I recognized some of the vendors, people I had written checks to, people who now looked right through me as if I were a stranger. I didn't react. We weren't there to make a scene. We were there to end a lie. David stayed close as we ascended the stone steps, his hand clenched around the folder I had given him, which contained the marriage certificate, the screenshots, all the evidence. I had my own copy tucked away in my purse, a backup just in case. No one challenged us. No one even questioned our presence. That's the nature of places like this. If you walk with enough confidence, people assume you belong. The ceremony hadn't begun yet. Guests were mingling, posing for photos in front of a floral arch that I had paid $1,600 for. I saw Ava before she saw me. She was standing with her bridesmaids, letting out that overly smooth laugh, a calculated display of lightness. Her dress was immaculate, her makeup flawless, like something from a magazine, but her eyes darted around as if she were scanning for potential threats. When she finally saw me, everything changed. The laugh died in her throat. Her shoulders tensed, her smile froze in place. Then she saw David. Her mouth fell open, but no sound came out. It was just pure, unfiltered panic. A bridesmaid said something to her, but Ava didn't respond. She simply turned and hurried toward the back of the venue. I didn't pursue her. There was no need. We weren't there for a backstage confrontation. We were there for the public moment she couldn't control. David glanced at me. "She's going to try something." "Let her," I said. We waited near the back as the music began and the guests started to take their seats. The quartet shifted to a classical arrangement of a pop song I didn't recognize. I wasn't listening anyway. The officiant took his place at the front, and a hush fell over the room. I scanned the crowd. No one had noticed us yet. Ethan emerged from a side door, adjusting his tie and offering a nervous smile. My heart ached. He looked so young, so certain, so prepared for a life that was a complete fiction. Then, Ava made her entrance. She had composed herself, her face fixed in a serene smile as she glided down the aisle with practiced elegance. Her hands were steady, her gaze forward, but she never once looked toward the back of the room. She never looked for me. It was as if by not seeing us, she could make us unreal. The officiant welcomed the guests, speaking of love, partnership, and trust. Then he uttered the pivotal words, "If anyone here knows of any reason why these two should not be joined in holy matrimony, let them speak now or forever hold their peace." I stepped forward, so did David. Gasps rippled through the room, followed by murmurs. I walked steadily down the aisle, my eyes fixed ahead. David followed, the folder held firmly in his hand. Ethan's smile evaporated. Ava's hands fell to her sides. The officiant stood frozen. A bridesmaid whispered, "What on earth is happening?" I stopped 3 feet from my son. "Ethan," I said, "I need you to look at this." And I held out the folder. Ethan didn't move at first, just stared at the folder as if it might detonate. His hands were at his sides, his fingers twitching, a telltale sign he was trying to maintain his composure. I remained silent, waiting. Ava, however, did not. "What is this?" she demanded, her voice tight and aimed like a weapon. "Why are you doing this?" I didn't answer her. I didn't even look at her. Ethan took the folder. He opened it, his movements slow, as if each page might slice his hands. The first document was the marriage license. I watched his eyes halt, then read and reread the text. His lips moved silently. He flipped to the next page, the screenshots of Ava's old Instagram post, the courthouse photo, and her caption. Then came the background check, the absent divorce filing, and finally the last photo, one of Ava with a little girl, the one she had claimed was her cousin's child. David stepped forward, his voice quiet but firm. "That's my daughter," he said. "And Ava's. She told me to get lost 3 years ago. Paid me 10 grand to stay silent so she could start over without any messy paperwork." The room fell so quiet you could hear the hum of the chandeliers. No one moved. The officiant looked like he was trapped in a bad dream. Ethan still hadn't spoken, just kept staring at the photos, his jaw tight, his shoulders locked. He looked like a statue that had been fractured down the middle. Ava took a desperate step forward. "This is absurd," she said, her voice shaking. "He's lying. He's been obsessed with me for years. He's trying to destroy my life. How can you listen to him?" She then turned on me, her words sharp. "You orchestrated this. You've always despised me. You're jealous because you can't stand that he loves someone more than you." I didn't move. I didn't blink. I refused to give her the confrontation she craved. "You lied," Ethan said. His voice was low, controlled, and frightening in a way I had never heard. "You lied about all of it." Ava reached for his arm, but he pulled back. "I did it for us," she pleaded. "I wanted a fresh start. That marriage was meaningless." "He was meaningless. I was trying to shield you from baggage that had nothing to do with you." David let out a single bitter laugh. "That's our daughter," he repeated. "You told me she was going to live with your aunt while you rebuilt your brand. You said she would get in the way of the life you were designing for yourself." A wave of murmurs swept through the guests, starting small and then growing louder. Chairs creaked. Someone in the back stood up. Ava looked around, panic finally breaking through her carefully constructed composure. "This isn't what it looks like," she insisted. "I swear to God." "Stop," Ethan said. Just one word, firm, final. She froze. There was no anger in his voice, no yelling, just a razor-sharp edge that communicated one thing. "This is over." He turned to the officiant. "We're done here." Then he turned to me. "Let's go." That was the moment it all sank in. Not just the event itself, not just that we had stopped it, but that he had believed me. He had chosen the difficult truth over the comforting denial, reality over the fantasy Ava had so masterfully woven. We walked out together with David following behind. The guests didn't know what to do. Some trailed after us while others remained in their seats, unsure if they had witnessed a real-life drama or an elaborate prank. It was real, and it was finished. I didn't say a word on the way out. I didn't have to. Ethan walked beside me, the folder still in his hand, his face a mask of unreadable emotions. The guests parted for us, whispering as if we were a breaking news story come to life. Ava's family didn't move. Her mother looked as if she had seen a ghost, and her father refused to make eye contact. We stepped back into the sunlight, and I finally allowed my shoulders to relax, just enough to take a full breath. At the car, David stopped. "I'm not looking to stay involved," he said. "I did what I promised, that's all." I nodded. "And you held up your end. Thank you." He handed the tie back to me, said nothing more, and walked away down the sidewalk like a man who had finally been granted leave from his own past. I slid into the driver's seat and looked over at Ethan. He hadn't spoken since we left the altar. His hands rested on his knees, his eyes fixed on the road ahead. "Are you okay?" I asked gently. He nodded once. "I think I knew," he said at last. "Not the details, but something. I just didn't want to be wrong about her, about the life I thought I was building." I didn't offer platitudes or comfort. Not yet. He wasn't ready. We drove in silence. When I dropped him off at his apartment, all he said was, "Thanks, Mom." That was it. Not emotional, not dramatic, just clean. The next morning, I opened the wedding binder for the last time. I went through it, line by line. Caterer, quartet, photographer, venue, brunch reservation, signature cocktail artist. Every single service had been booked in my name and paid for with my credit card. I spent the entire afternoon on the phone. I informed each vendor that the wedding was canceled, not postponed, canceled. No one argued. They all had cancellation policies. The refunds weren't complete, but they were substantial. I stopped every payment that hadn't fully processed and disputed the few that had with my credit card company. It took hours, but by the end of the day, the brunch was canceled, the open bar was rescinded, the band was unbooked. I even canceled the post-wedding spa day appointments she had covertly added to my account 2 weeks prior. I didn't lash out, post on social media, or call her family to give my side of the story. I simply dismantled what I had built, line by line, until no trace of her wedding remained. Ava never reached out. Not that day, not the day after. I imagine she tried to salvage the situation, to rebook or explain, but her name wasn't attached to anything. She hadn't lifted a finger. She believed the money made her invincible, but the money was mine. And now, like her illusion, it was gone. I didn't do it for revenge. I did it to reclaim the part of myself I had sacrificed for the sake of a false peace. Because peace purchased with silence isn't peace at all. It's a form of captivity, and I was no longer willing to live that way. Ethan didn't call for 3 weeks. No texts, no emails, just a profound silence. I didn't pursue him. I understood what that quiet signified. It wasn't anger or blame. It was the aftershock. The kind of emotional debris that makes no sound but sits in a room, heavy and still, until someone is ready to start clearing it away. I cleaned the house, returned to work, and picked up an extra shift at the library just to keep my hands occupied. I didn't speak about it to anyone. Not my sister, not the florist who kept calling about the unclaimed centerpiece vases. I just kept my own counsel and waited for the dust to settle. That's a lesson you learn as a mother. You get accustomed to waiting in rooms where your child doesn't yet know how to talk to you. Then one Sunday, I returned from the grocery store to find a brown paper bag on my porch. Inside was a container of my favorite chicken soup from a deli across town. There was no note, no name, but I knew who it was from. A week later, a text arrived. "Do you still have my old toolkit?" I did. I left it on the porch for him. He came by after I was in bed. I heard the screen door close and the steps creak. That was all. 2 weeks after that, he called to ask if I'd seen a specific screwdriver in the box. I hadn't, but we stayed on the phone for a few minutes, talking about the weather and a difficult client he was dealing with. Then we said goodbye. It continued like that for a while, a slow mending, one small gesture at a time. He never formally apologized, and I never asked him to. I didn't need the words. I needed the effort, and slowly it returned. He started coming over on Sundays, bringing coffee, helping me fix a loose cabinet door. He would stay just long enough to ask how I was sleeping. I didn't press him. I didn't mention Ava. I didn't ask about his feelings. I just allowed him to be there. That was enough. One night he brought a young woman with him, introducing her as just a friend. Her name was Lena. She was a lawyer for a nonprofit, wore her hair in a simple braid, and brought a bottle of wine she had actually researched to pair with the pasta I was making. After dinner, she helped clear the table without being prompted, wiped down the counter, and asked about the third-grade photo of Ethan that still hangs by the refrigerator. She looked at him when he spoke, not just to feign listening, but to truly hear him. And when she asked about me, her questions were genuine and curious, not just polite. I watched Ethan relax in her presence, not trying to impress, just being himself. It was the first time I had seen him truly breathe around someone. That's when I knew. Whatever Ava had been, Lena was not. She wasn't flawless or polished. She was present, and that was worth more than all the chandeliers in the world. They were married in my backyard. There was no stage, no grand chandeliers, no imported flowers. Just folding chairs I borrowed from the church down the road, a string of lights from my garage, and a white sheet hung from the porch railing because Lena said it reminded her of summers at her grandmother's house. Ethan built the wedding arch himself, sanded it, stained it, and hauled it across town in a borrowed truck. Lena wore a simple dress with no train, no veil, no designer tag. She walked barefoot across the grass and smiled at me as if we were already family. I prepared the food, poured the wine, and baked a cake that had a cracked edge and a slightly lopsided top layer that no one cared about. It didn't need to be perfect. It just needed to be made with love. And it was. Every motion in the kitchen that day was deliberate, almost ceremonial. I chopped vegetables with steady hands, stirred sauces like I used to when Ethan was little, humming softly without realizing. It was as if, in preparing that meal, I was stitching together every version of myself, the mother I had been, the woman I had become, and the one I had nearly lost in between. Their vows were handwritten, slightly uneven, a bit clumsy, but deeply sincere in a way that no polished speech could ever replicate. There were no sweeping metaphors borrowed from poetry, no carefully rehearsed lines found on wedding blogs. Instead, their words were stitched together with shared memories, private jokes, and small quiet promises that carried the weight of real experience. Lena spoke about Ethan's habit of counting steps when he's nervous, how she first noticed it on their third date, and how it's now something she finds comforting. Ethan, in turn, talked about Lena's ritual of double knotting her shoelaces before every big moment, job interviews, road trips, even arguments. These weren't romanticized quirks. They were honest, everyday pieces of each other. It was raw and unfiltered. These weren't just vows. They were glimpses into a love built not on spectacle, but on small, consistent truth. The kind of love I had once only dared to hope he would find, and he did. When Ethan turned to me just before the ceremony and asked, "Will you walk me down the aisle?" everything inside me paused. Not from shock, not even from joy, but from the overwhelming weight of being seen, after everything. After the years of distance, of tension, of being treated like a footnote in my own family's story, I was suddenly not just invited back in. I was brought to the front, beside him. I had stopped hoping for that moment long ago, because it hurt too much to want it. But there it was, offered, not as a favor, but as a truth, as recognition. We didn't mention Ava. We didn't need to. That chapter was done, not ripped out in anger, but closed with resolve. Everyone there seemed to know that this day wasn't about appearances. It wasn't about who was right or who was loudest. It was about something softer, deeper. This day was about love, the kind that survives fire, that adapts without breaking, that shows up quietly after the noise is gone. After the vows, Lena took my hand. She didn't rush it. She looked me in the eye with such steadiness, as if she wanted me to really hear her. And she said, "Thank you for raising the man I get to love." That was it. No fanfare, no dramatic soundtrack in the background. Just a sentence, simple and sacred. It knocked the air out of me, because it made every difficult day worth it. Every slammed door, every sleepless night, every time I bit my tongue just to keep the peace, all of it suddenly had meaning. Not because I had won anything, but because I was finally seen not just as the mother in the background, but as someone who mattered, someone whose pain and effort had weight. That night, long after the guests had gone home and the lights had been dimmed, I sat on the back steps of the house barefoot, the coolness of the stone grounding me. I drank leftover wine from a mason jar, not out of thrift, but out of habit, because I've never cared much for appearances, and I just listened to the night, to the wind, to my own breathing. The quiet wasn't empty. It wasn't lonely. It was earned. It was the kind of quiet that follows truth. You don't get many moments like that in life, moments that are neither bitter nor sweet, but something in between, something honest, something steady, something that says, you made it through, not triumphantly, not unscathed, but whole. I never received a thank you card from Ava, no apology, no letter, not even a passing word, and I don't need one. I've learned that closure isn't always a conversation. Sometimes it's just peace. Sometimes it's silence that doesn't hurt anymore. Ava is a footnote now, a shadow in a chapter that no longer defines the story. She tried to rewrite history, paint herself as the victim, the martyr. But truth doesn't need to shout. It doesn't need to plead. It simply waits. And eventually it takes its place. Ethan is happy now. And I don't say that lightly. I say it because I've seen it in his eyes, in his posture, in the way he speaks with Lena like they're building something together, not just posing for the world. Lena is grounded, kind, and unafraid to speak plainly. She doesn't try to control the narrative. She simply lives it, and that is more refreshing than I can describe. And me? I'm not just the mother anymore, not just the background presence. I am the witness. I am the survivor. I am the keeper of a story that many tried to silence, I am the proof that love doesn't have to mean silence, that it doesn't have to bend so far it breaks, that peace isn't given, it's created and it's fought for. I used to think that being right was the goal, that if I could just show them the truth, if I could just prove my point, everything would be okay. But I've learned something else. Sometimes the greatest victory isn't being right. It's being remembered. It's being acknowledged without having to scream. It's being able to sit in silence without bitterness. So no, I didn't gloat. I didn't post photos or give speeches. I simply lived the day. I stood beside my son. I hugged his wife. I drank wine in my bare feet and watched the stars. And in that moment, I knew this was the life I had earned. That's all for today. What about you? What would you have done in her shoes? Let me know in the comments. I read every one. And if this story resonated with you, stay a while. There's more where that came from. More quiet victories, more earned peace, more reminders that healing doesn't have to be loud to be real.